how good is your favorite NFL team after 4 weeks of the 2024 NFL season. What's going on, football fans? Welcome to the Week 5 NFL Power Rankings video on the Bottom Line View, where I rank all 32 NFL teams from number 32 to number 1, from the worst to the best. If that sounds good, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, I'm going to bring the honest, brutal truth about how good or bad your favorite team is. So comment in the comment section below your opinion. Let me know if I'm right. Let me know if I'm wrong about your favorite team. Let's begin with the worst team in the NFL at number 32. The worst team just so happens to be my favorite team. Unfortunately, for me, the Patriots are still number 32 because it's simple, guys. The offense is the worst in the league. The offensive line is an absolute disaster. They can't block. The run game is being stuffed because everybody knows they can't hold up in pass protection long enough to throw the ball over the defense's heads. They don't have a deep threat. They don't have anyone that can separate down the field. When Demario Douglas is open, Jacoby Brissett doesn't even see him. The only hope we have as Patriots fans to keep this entertainment alive for the rest of the year is Drake May. And they won't play Drake May because of the status of this offensive line. It's so bad. It might be detrimental to Drake May mentally, right? I don't believe that. I'm not in the same camp as many of these Patriot beat reporters who think Drake May is going to lose all his confidence because he's behind a bad offensive line and he's not in a good offense. Okay. Josh Allen made it work. Actually, sometimes playing in a bad offense can be good for a young quarterback because they can learn from that experience. And I believe Drake May is mentally strong enough to do that. Drake May's always been better than Jacoby Brissett. He should have been playing from week 1. What the problem is, you didn't fix left tackle all offseason. You didn't fix the offensive line all offseason. You didn't do anything to help the wide receiving core outside of a couple draft picks. Polk looks all right. We haven't really seen Baker at all this year. I like Hunter Henry. I like Stevenson. I like Douglas, but it's just not enough right now, given the offensive line is so bad. I don't care what Browns fans say, Jacksonville fans say, Duval. I don't care, man. The Dolphins fans, you guys can cry all you want about your offensive line. Have you watched the Patriots' offensive line? And then you look at the defense, right? And the Patriots' defense entering the year, I said elite unit. And a lot of people high on the Patriots' defense, given what they did last year, even with injuries. But I think what we've seen from the Patriots' defense is just too many injuries to overcome right now, like Jawan Bentley out, Christian Barmore out for the year, Judon traded. Like, you lose legitimately good players at all levels, and it's going to hurt your defense. I don't care how good Christian Gonzalez is. I don't care how good Keon White has been. When you lose those pieces to your defense, it's not going to make you elite anymore. It's going to make you just good, just above average, which is not good enough to carry a putrid Patriot offense. And honestly, I think the defense is missing the creative flair and game-to-game game plans of one Bill Belichick. So combining just a good defense and the worst offense in the league, arguably right now, that makes them the worst team in the NFL. And I think they'll be a bottom 3 team. But luckily for the Patriots and Patriots Nation, they can win a game next week. In week 5, they're actually favored right now, as of Tuesday, against the Miami Dolphins, who are my number 31 team. The Dolphins are number 31. And the reason for that is the Dolphins have a couple of big issues. First of all, Tua being injured has put Skylar Thompson at quarterback and then Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Now, the problem that compounded the Tua loss was the offensive line being awful. Just like New England. Injuries to Teron Armstead certainly don't help, but the offensive line, they can't run the ball up the middle. Like, you ever notice the Dolphins, every run they have is horizontal? Every play that they try to make happen under Mike McDaniel is horizontal. Defenses have figured this out. And that's why there's so many negative plays for the Dolphins. And right now, the last couple of weeks, this is the worst offense in the league. With Mike Macdonald. The version on offense of Mike Macdonald, Mike McDaniel. I fixed it. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Those guys are awesome. Devon Achane, home run hitter. These guys are great. Way better skill players than the Patriots, right? But when you have a third string level quarterback out there and Tyler Huntley or Skylar Thompson compared to Tua, who was uniquely suited to run this offense because this offense was manufactured and built for Tua. You ever notice that? The quick game, the quick trigger, the understanding of the motions and the matchups within the offense. And when you strip that magic and voodoo away and all the smoke and mirrors of the Tua-led attack, you put a backup in there with a bad offensive line and you run traditional offense and it just doesn't work. It's awful, actually. Tyreek looks frustrated. Waddle looks frustrated. The defense, they're okay, but they're also injured. Kendall Fuller, David Long, injured. Jalen Phillips left the game. And this is what I said about the Dolphins. They sign injured players. David Long, I'm shocked he got hurt. Teron Armstead, I'm shocked he got hurt. Kendall Fuller, a little bit surprising. Jalen Phillips, no, not shocked. Right? Like, I think Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell, Javon Holland, some of their players are playing really well on defense. But it's just not enough when the offense is going backwards every second play. And Mike McDaniel has no control over the identity of this team. He looks lost. So the Dolphins are a disaster. They might actually lose to the Patriots, which would in fact move them to number 32. The difference between the Dolphins and the Patriots, at least there's hope. They can see a little glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel with Tua potentially coming back and getting healthier. This team does have talent. So there's a glimmer, but they need to start winning some games. At number 30, the Jacksonville Jags. Jacksonville played better against the Texans. And I do think they can pick up their first win against the Colts. They're favored by a field goal. Could maybe be Joe Flacco-led Colts team. No Jonathan Taylor, which is, I think, a bigger loss than Anthony Richardson for sure, because Flacco might be better than Richardson in all honesty, and we'll talk about that with the Colts. But I thought Jacksonville could have beat Miami in week 1. Could have beat the Texans. They've had a tough schedule when you really think about it. The one that they let slip away was the Browns game. Like, given how the Browns have looked, I'm not sure how you could lose that game. But Jacksonville, they have crippling weaknesses. Trevor Lawrence making as much money as he does, being as inconsistent as he is crippling. The offensive line being terrible is crippling because the run game's inconsistent, despite having two dynamic backs in ETN and Bigsby that I like. The passing game's inconsistent because they can't create downfield throws, because Lawrence is slow-minded and their offensive line takes a little time to penetrate, right? So, Evan Ingram hurt, but I like him. I like Brian Thomas. I like Christian Kirk. I like some of the pieces of the offense, but Doug Peterson, terrible fourth down calls. The defense can't cover a soul. Pretty good run defense. They're a more put-together team than the teams below them, in my opinion. They've got more upside. They've shown more nuance in terms of performance. I think they've improved a little bit from that shellacking that the Bills gave them to the game against Houston in Houston, where they were competitive and could have won. So I see Jacksonville trending upward a little bit. But Doug Peterson needs to learn these fourth down decisions are not working for him, and they need to be better on the offensive line and in the secondary, and I'm worried they just don't have the talent to make that happen. So at number 30, the Jags. At number 29, the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, Deshaun Watson, obviously not the best quarterback in the league, and I've talked about him at length so many times. I don't need to go into nuance here. The offensive line is horrible. And I think the biggest thing that we've noticed from the offense, I think, is a product of Deshaun. They don't know what they are from a scheme perspective because they don't know what works with him at quarterback. Stefanski is having to run things that aren't his bread and butter. And that is, I think, pulling this offense away from what actually they should be, which is their run-heavy play-action approach. Their running game has been less than stellar due to the offensive line injuries and Nick Chubb being out. Their running backs are just guys, right? Like nothing special. Jags, as Steve Smith would say. Amari Cooper can't catch a cold, and David Njoku has been injured. So their offensive line all the way around, their offense in general all the way around, horrible, because they have nothing they can rely on. Not Deshaun, not the running game, not the O-line, nothing. No bread, no butter, no scheme that's really working for them. And it's a mix of two schemes that aren't really meshing. The defense has just regressed naturally. They've had a couple guys get banged up front, but also they just haven't been able to play as well. We've seen with Jim Schwartz defenses in the past, one year they're very, very, very good. The next they kind of drop off. And that's because he really becomes reliant on tendencies and man coverage, blitz, man coverage in general has been a huge tendency for them. So teams have kind of figured out what they're doing and how they're attacking offenses. And teams have been able to slow them down, their pass rush. So I just think the Browns, still a good defense, but not elite, not superb, not historic, because natural regression was due to happen. So the Browns have nothing to rely on offense. They have no leadership, and their coaching is just slightly regressing because offensively they don't know their rhyme and reason, and defensively it's just naturally a product of Jim Schwartz. At number 28, I have the Carolina Panthers, who somehow, some way are not a bottom 3 team in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers have a terrible defense, and a lot of them are hurt. Derek Brown and Shaq Thompson are now gone for the year. They're picking up guys like Caleb Farley off of the waiver wire. Like, this is a desperation mode. They're not going to stop many people. Now, offensively, they've actually become competent. Yes, they lost Damian Lewis on the left side of their O-line, but Andy Dalton has been good. And I think what Andy Dalton has taught us is that he's not the most physically gifted by a long shot. He's probably in the bottom 3 in starters in the NFL right now. He doesn't have a strong arm. But what does he have? He has the capacity to read defenses. He has accuracy. He has the ability to know where to go with the ball and stay on time and stay in rhythm and know how to operate within a pass-protecting offensive line in that pocket and the movement within that pocket and the understanding the clock within the mind of understanding NFL football. And we're seeing that nuance translate to Sundays with Carolina and not with other players. Like, it's almost bringing up the question of, have we gone too far with quarterbacks of having to be physically so good, like running around in circles and making crazy throws off platform? And have we lost the art of the pocket quarterback? And really, Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco and these guys are showing us that that's more important, because these guys that are supposed to be washed and no good are putting up better numbers than these young quarterbacks that don't have any accuracy, consistency, or mental game at this level. So Andy Dalton has shown us some things. The O-line in Carolina is still well put together. The run game, I think, is underrated. I like what I've seen from Xavier Legette lately and Deontay Johnson, and I think that they have a better offense than the rest of the list right now, and that's why they're at 28. And the defense is terrible, but I think their offense allows them to hang in games and in higher scoring affairs. We'll see if they just continue to get injured. This might just continue to move them down the list. But at number 28, Carolina. At number 27, the New York Giants. The Giants lost a tough one to the Cowboys. I thought that they definitely could have won this game, actually. They moved the ball pretty well. I was overall impressed by Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, and the offense of the Giants. I thought they blocked and protected well. Andrew Thomas is one of the best tackles in football. There's no doubt. He might be in the top 3, honestly. The Giants defense, they've got a decent front 7 overall. Their secondary, though, is absolutely horrific. They just allowed way too many explosive plays and easy gains down the field to the Cowboys. And the Cowboys aren't an easy team to cover, but I will say the Giants just have an awkward composition of a really like lacking talent offense that has one superstar and he's very young, pretty well schemed and play called from the offensive standpoint, but just not a lot of talent, combined with a defense that has some good guys up front, but just not enough in the back end to make them like a together defense. If this defense was better, then they probably would be like a 7-8 win team type vibe. But Daniel Jones isn't good enough. And it just feels like the offense isn't overall consistently explosive enough, good enough for them to get away with having such a terrible secondary. So at number 27, I have the Giants. At number 26, the Las Vegas Raiders, who are somehow 2-2. They feel worse than they did last year, despite their record. I've got to give them credit for beating the Browns in a game that I didn't think they would win after Max Crosby and Devontae Adams were out. I failed to mention that with the Browns. Like, Devontae Adams and Max Crosby and Diablo and Malcolm Kuntz and all these guys are injured, and you still can't beat the Raiders. That's embarrassing. I love Minshew, man. Regardless, Brock Bowers is a stud. Trey Tucker is a player. Jacoby Myers is stepping up. And the run game, still not great. The defense, very well coached. Despite the personnel losses, very well coached. You've got to give the Raiders credit, man. Now, that being said, if they lose Devontae Adams to trade, this team has virtually no upside. They do feel like a team that will fight and be a pain in the butt every week, but just not good enough, talented enough overall at quarterback, in the run game on offense, and just okay on defense. They're not dominant enough to be like a playoff flirting team, but they somehow are 2-2. At number 25, a 1-3 Tennessee Titan team that I think has just been better than their record all year. And I think the main thing we saw with the Titans was Will Levis left, Mason Rudolph came in. They just became a more stable offense, less frantic play. They ran the ball well against Miami with Tony Pollard and company, and Tony Pollard looks fantastic, by the way. Spears looked real good in that game. D-Hop made plays. Right, Ridley still needs to get it going, but I thought the Tennessee Titans O-line had one of their better games here. Mason Rudolph got the ball out on time, in rhythm, didn't make crucial mistakes like Will Levis, who threw the ball right to Emmanuel Ogbah early in the game. And on the other side, the Titans have a legitimate defense, and they did that without Jeff Simmons. It was a dominant performance. Jeffrey Simmons will definitely help. I love what I've seen from Sweat. I think Landry's been solid. Ernest Jones has been a great trade, and most importantly, L'Jarius Sneed has been all that he's been really made out to be. So at number 25, the Titans could be sneaky if they can get more consistent quarterback play. I do think they're better than people think. At number 24, the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are a team full of bad teams that just understand how to win. They're well coached under Sean Payton, and shout out to Vance Joseph, who I think's low-key been like a top 3 defensive coordinator in the league this year. He's gotten a lot out of a pretty limited defense from a personnel perspective, but they have one of the best pass rushes in football right now. They're frustrating to block. They're quick, they're fast, they're nasty. And Pat Surtain has been playing great lately, so that allows them to have a shutdown, lockdown corner on one side of the field, so they can do a lot of schematically different things with that. And Sean Payton gets the most out of this limited offense. Bo Nix has still not done a lot. I thought his best game was against Tampa. He didn't really do anything against the Jets. They ran the ball probably better than they have all year against New York. Javonte Williams finally came through with a good performance. The O-line solid enough that it's not detrimental to them winning football games. Cortland Sutton makes some catches every now and again, but this is not a good team. Like, don't mistake the Broncos at 2-2 for being a good team. They're just a mistake-free team. They hang in games. They let the other team lose games. And that's why they're 2-2. I don't see them having very much potential, but I think they're better than the bad teams because they don't lose games on purpose. At number 23, the Los Angeles Rams, who have a lot more upside than the previous teams mentioned, but I still feel like they're still dealing with some injuries. And I'm a little bit frustrated with the overall consistency of this team. I feel like they've had good weeks offensively at times, bad weeks offensively, good weeks defensively, bad weeks defensively. I think overall what we've learned is the defense is pretty bad. Like, it's probably bottom 5 in the league. Their run defense against the Bears even was decimated, which is not a good sign because the Bears can't run the ball on anybody, and they ran the ball on the Rams, which is a horrific sign. Their linebacker position has been terrible. Ernest Jones being traded was as big as I thought it would be. The secondary just doesn't have a lot of talent. They're well put together. I feel like their coverages are sound. Like, they do a lot of good things in terms of being in the right places. They just don't have a lot of talent. I think the best part of the defense is the pass rush, and it's hard to unlock that pass rush when you can't stop the run. Offensively, their offensive line has been inconsistent with injuries. I think it's been healthier as of late and therefore better, which has unlocked Kyren Williams in the run game a little bit more. Once they get their receivers back, I think they'll get back to being a top 10 offense in football. Matthew Stafford is still playing pretty well, but what Matthew Stafford can't do is make that one or two critical turnover at the wrong time against a team like the Bears with a struggling quarterback and a struggling offense, and that lost them the game against the Bears, but they were due to come back down to earth after a lucky victory over San Fran. So at number 23, the Rams. At number 22, the Chicago Bears. The Bears beat the Rams. I'm not convinced about this team. I like the defense a lot. I think right now they're performing at a top 5 rate in the NFL. The secondary is very good. They're sticky in coverage. Shout out to Jalen Johnson and the boys. Linebackers, TJ Edwards, very, very good player. And the D-line is playing better than you would have thought from a pass rushing standpoint. Sweat is playing well. And the run defense has been solid enough. I think that that's been their most susceptible area so far on defense. But otherwise, I mean, they're causing turnovers. They're getting key stops when they need to. They're keeping their team in the game as expected. But the offense is so frustrating and inconsistent. Caleb Williams, far too many sacks. And when you look at the biggest thing that's been detrimental to Chicago, it's the amount of yards that they've lost on sacks because Caleb Williams continues to hold on the ball and run backwards and get tripped up and sacked, which ends drives immediately. DJ Moore looks frustrated. Cole Kmet had a huge game the week previous against the Colts, a little bit quiet against the Rams. Keenan Allen didn't really seem to help all that much. Roma Dunze has been kind of a bust so far, and the O-line has been really, really bad. But at least they found a way to run the ball. Caleb needs to be more consistently accurate, needs to make the throws that are there more consistently, and he needs to get his deep ball at a higher level, because right now his deep ball has been atrocious. A lot of people are saying that Caleb has been rather really good or really bad. I somewhat agree with that, but I just think that some of these easy plays and easy throws need to be better, and I'm just not a fan of Shane Waldron. I don't think he's getting the most out of this talent on the offensive side of the ball. At number 21, the Indianapolis Colts, who I actually think would be a better team with Joe Flacco. I think Joe Flacco is better than people think. I think he proved that against, all odds in Cleveland last year, coming off the bench. Not even the bench, the couch. Joe Flacco, once again, enters a game, no time to warm up. He's slinging touchdowns left and right. All of a sudden, you see Michael Pittman going for over 100 yards, Josh Downs having a great game. Who would have thought that these players were really talented at wide receiver? I would have, but the only problem is that you have Anthony Richardson in there, who has a worse completion percentage than Tim Tebow. Right? The offensive line is phenomenal, and the run game with Jonathan Taylor is really difficult to stop for any defense, which I feel like with Joe Flacco in there, this would be a really tough offense. I actually think, because the combination of the drop back play action game with that running game, I think would be tough. Now, the defense is not good, very susceptible to the pass. They have a terrible secondary. And their run defense, they're having to resort a lot of numbers to the box to stop it, which is also opening up big plays down the field. So I think what's holding back this team so far this year, quarterback, defense. Quarterback, defense. Defense, rather, can't stop the run or the pass. They can't figure it out. So the defense is awful. It's bottom 3 in the league. I think if Joe Flacco gets in there, though, they become more entertaining, despite that maybe hurting their long-term future. But Richardson has got some injury issues, man. At number 20, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are funky right now because they've disappointed the last couple of weeks after a humongous Rams beating a couple of weeks ago where they shellacked the Los Angeles Rams. The Cardinals have come back down to earth. They were a little underwhelming offensively against Detroit, and now that we look at how Seattle performed against Detroit, we now understand that was pretty underwhelming. And then you look at the Washington game, the worst defense in the NFL to that date. They did nothing. They scored 14 points against the Commanders at home. That is simply not good enough. I don't know if I'm overrating Kyler Murray. I don't know what it is. They're able to run the ball against most teams, but the passing game is just too inconsistent. And maybe they're missing Trey McBride. I don't know, man. The offense needs to be a lot better because the defense is not good enough to carry this team. And the defense is nowhere near good enough. I mean, they're one of the worst defenses in the league from a talent and a production standpoint. Their run defense has been improved this year, but I thought Brian Robinson had a good day, and they allowed Jaden Daniels to be comfortable and effective once again. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders ripping up defenses every week. They did the same to the Cardinals, and this team just doesn't look in a good place right now. They have a chance, divisional game against San Francisco, big underdog. Can they get something going in this spot? We'll see. But I might have to continue to move them down. I just think it's hard because on paper, and we've seen flashes, the offense is there, and the defense, I do like their scheme. I just feel like their talent isn't there. At number 19, the Los Angeles Chargers. It is not time to bolt up for the Chargers. They're injured, and I think that cost them the game against the Chiefs. Herbert is hobbled. The O-line injured. Joe Alt-Delete injured. Ladd McConkey looks real good. That's nice to see. And the run game has been down the last couple of weeks. Chiefs and Steelers shut down J.K. Dobbins. Not a good sign. This team needs to run the ball to be successful. Defensively, they're a lot more competent than I would have given them credit for before the year. You got to give credit to the new defensive staff, the new defensive coordinator in there. I believe it's Minter, right? He's done a great job. And Joey Bosa, I don't even think played against the Chiefs. Derwin James didn't play against the Chiefs. So this team, you got to give them credit for competing and being tough and physical and gritty, but they're just not that talented. I think that, again, dating back to the offseason discussion, they can hang in games. They're tough. They're physical. They believe in their identity, but they're just not that talented, especially on the perimeter and especially, with those injuries because they're not very thick in terms of depth. They're very thin. So 19, the Chargers just feel like a competent football team, but not a good one. At number 18, the Dallas Cowboys, who they're kind of the opposite of the Chargers. Like they have high upside, but their floor on a given week is pretty low because there's times where they just can't fit the run. They can't stop it. And then on offense, everything kind of steamrolls downhill for them and they can't run the ball and turnovers happen and pressure on Dak happens and things go bad. But I thought that CeeDee Lamb got back on track against the Giants. I thought Dak had his best game of the season. The way he was moving, the way that he was throwing, his throws were accurate on time. The defense, looked pretty bad in my opinion. Like in the secondary, they were giving up big plays left and right. They couldn't really cover consistently, and the pass rush was underwhelming. Now they lose Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence entering a game on the road against the Steelers in primetime. A tough scene. They need to do better running the ball to control the game and allow their defense to play complementary football instead of having to make a lot of big-time stops. I think the problem is that their run game is just not good because of the young pieces on the O-line, the lack of continuity there, and then the lack of talented runners. I do think Dowdle helps them when he plays more, but I don't know. Ferguson, CD, good, but everything else, Tolbert and Cooks didn't look great in that game against the Giants. It was really just CD and Ferguson, and Dak playing really well. So, yeah, this team feels like not a playoff team this year. They just have too many holes. It's a weird one because they have studs, but they have holes, and those holes are kind of outweighing the studs right now. At number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals. I almost want to put them higher. I think this is right now a top 5 offense in the NFL. Joe Burrow is low-key playing pretty darn good the last couple of games. He has played Carolina and Washington. I thought he played okay against the Chiefs. He did make a critical mistake at a bad moment. But I think the Burrow that we're seeing is more confident, composed, the way that he's extending plays. I've been really impressed with the pass protection in recent weeks. Jamar Chase has hit big plays the last couple of weeks. T. Higgins looked like T. Higgins this week. And the added dimension of Chase Brown getting more touches, I think will continue to unlock this running game. And they were the most balanced we've seen the Bengals all year in that game. So that was huge to see. Defensively, they're still putrid. It's rather giving up too many big plays down the field or just constant gashing in the running game. Like I said, they need their D tackles back. I'll reevaluate their defense once they get healthier in the front, but they should really think about adding free agents and or adding some trades to the mix because their defense is really holding them back from being the AFC North top dog because the offense is super, super good. They have a huge game coming up against the Ravens. At number 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have, in my opinion, still the best defense in football, but they have hit a couple injuries. I would also say that the offense, I'm really worried, and this is why I've moved them down a little bit. I'm really worried about the offensive line. They've had some injuries to the offensive line, specifically at guard, James Daniels, Isaac Seumalo. Both players out. Seumalo might return soon. The tackles aren't good in their own right, and then Justin Fields is a bit erratic. I do think he played well against the Colts because it's the Colts. Like their secondary is terrible. They're so worried about stopping the run that they allow big plays down the field. I do think Fields has looked better and better and better and better and more confident inside this Arthur Smith system with the Steelers. George Pickens had a good game against the Colts. Cordell Patterson oddly looks fantastic when he's been in there, but did get injured as well. So the Steelers, I feel like, I just don't feel the ceiling with this team. I feel like their floor is fairly high. They've got a really strong defense. They don't turn it over too much. They don't beat themselves. Fields does bring a little bit more of a dynamic element to their quarterback play than they've had in recent years. But I just don't feel the ceiling. It's something is missing for me. I think it's the offensive line play. I think it's that they're not as good of a run team as I would have thought. And the passing game overall is just not very good. So I think it's the offense, really, just in general. But yeah, something is holding me back from ranking this team more confidently. At number 15, the New York Jets, very similar to Pittsburgh. I just feel like the Jets have a way better, more talented, more upside offense. While the Jets defense might not be as good as the Steelers, I still think it's good. I think that their losses were first, week one, Aaron Rodgers returning in San Francisco. That would have been a loss for most teams in the NFL. And then you look at the other loss, the Broncos, sloppy, bad weather. It was at home, but this was the type of loss that I think puts more emphasis on Robert Saleh, Hackett, the coaching staff, than the talent and the players. The players need to show up, but this is on the coaching staff. Rodgers needs to play better, and honestly, the O-line is good. I don't know what's going on with Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson has been underwhelming. Breece Hall, underwhelming. Both first-round picks in fantasy football. They need to be better. Mike Williams has slowly looked better, though, throughout the course of the season. The defense does look the way that we thought it would. They've been more dominant the last couple of weeks, but they've been playing limited offenses in Denver and New England. I just feel like there's an upside and an intangible to the Jets that in any given week they can compete with the best teams in football. But I also feel like they're one of those teams that can lose to any team in football. So it's kind of dependent on which Rodgers we get in a given week. But I did think they could have beat the Broncos, right? They did miss a field goal at the end of the game from 50 yards out. That would have won them the game. It was a tough game to lose. They did outgain the Broncos, things like that. The offense was a bit frustrating. But I think that comes down to the coaching, which we knew was going to be tough, which we knew was going to be inconsistent. So at number 15, the New York Jets. At number 14, I have the Washington Commanders. This team's difficult to rank because they arguably have the best offense and the worst defense in the NFL. Now, their defense did play well against the Cardinals, but I still think, based on the metrics, the EPA numbers, they're still the worst defense in the league. So that speaks volumes, right? They played an oddly good game against the Cardinals, but will that continue? We will see. I still don't believe in their secondary or their pass rush very much. Now, on the other hand, the offense has been super efficient. They're running the ball. They're throwing the ball. They're getting the ball out quick to their playmakers. They're excellent after the catch. They're breaking tackles left and right. They're maintaining drives. They're going for it and getting it consistently. Cliff Kingsbury's been in his bag with Jaden Daniels, and Daniels has been super accurate, on the money, timing, rhythm. Just the throws are pinpoint. And that's been the most impressive part about Jaden Daniels. I still think that from an overall like traditional drop back quarterback situation and standpoint, he's not the most talented. But in terms of what they're running in Washington and they're making him and allowing him to do, he's executing at a very high level, scrambling, putting the ball where it needs to go on these plays to get yards after catch or to throw into a tight window when it needs to be had. I think all these different players are contributing, from McNichols to Robinson to McLaurin to Zacchaeus to Luke McCaffrey, Ertz. All these guys are stepping up when they need to, which is maybe it's a disguise, maybe it's a little bit of a hot streak going on right now, and maybe that will fade as the season goes on. That's probable, as that quarterbacks and rookies especially tend to fade down the stretch. But I do think for now, this looks like maybe the best team in their division, at least a threat to dethrone the Cowboys and to be better than the Eagles. The defense, though, is just what I'm worried about. I just think they have to win every week in a shootout, and it's just very hard to do that when your team has a rookie quarterback. As good as he's playing, it's hard to rely on that each week. The offensive line, though, might be the most impressive part. I mean, nobody thought this O-line would be playing this well. At number 13, I have the New Orleans Saints, who have a lesser record than the Commanders. I think they have a more full and balanced team. Now, the problem with the Saints, which is where I didn't really know where to rank them, is their injuries. They have a lot of injuries, and I think that's holding them back right now. The offensive line injuries are huge for them. I mean, in pass protection and the run game, their run game hasn't been as good since losing McCoy at center. They've lost guards as well. Linebacker is pretty decimated with Willie Gay getting hurt, as well as Demario Davis. We'll see if they return or either of them return. Tyrann Mathieu went down last game. They have some injuries on defense. They have some injuries on offense. I love the combination of Olave and Shaheed. I think Kamara's playing some of his best football in years. I think that Derek Carr overall has been really good. And the defense, they're a good defense when they're healthy. I especially love the cornerback combination of Lattimore and Adebo, but I just think that they're beat up, and it's hard to really understand what they are when they're beat up. So they could have easily beat the Falcons. The mistakes and the big turnovers for big touchdowns was the difference. So I'm still keeping them up in this top 15. They're a debatable range here. At number 12, the Philadelphia Eagles, who did beat the Saints but dropped a game to the Bucs. The Eagles are also injured, which keeps them out of the top 10. If this was a fully healthy Eagles team, I'd still have them probably at like number 10 or something like that. But the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, I think, is the least talked about quarterback in terms of he needs to play better. And not a lot of people are calling him out, and I'm not sure why. His turnovers have been horrendous since the beginning of last year. He's clearly and identifiably a guy with weaknesses that defenses know about, like his ability to throw on the run with a flexible arm to make throws off platform is really limited. He throws the ball away a lot or scrambles, right? He's not quite as quick or fast as he used to be. And he does struggle with vision, reading defenses in traditional drop back pass. The offensive line is really good still. Saquon has been phenomenal. Their receivers missing have been huge for them. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Those receivers allow this offense to run. And without them, they're not the same offense or the same team. The defense has been too inconsistent for my liking. The pass rush has been underwhelming. The run defense, I think, has been solid, but the secondary and the pass rush and the combination of the inconsistencies from Old Man Slay and Rookie Mitchell, they're giving up big plays in key spots, and they're not getting enough pressure as they would have expected, along with a pretty shaky linebacker position. This defense is probably in the bottom 10 to 12 in the NFL. They've put together very few impressive performances on defense, but when they're healthy on offense, they are dynamic and very difficult to stop. So it's hard to evaluate this team right now. At number 11, the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are a team that did beat the Eagles, so that also was a little bit factored in, although, it doesn't really matter too much. They also beat the Saints. I think both the games that they won were rather fluky, and I thought that the games that they lost, almost they were warranted to win. So the Falcons are a tricky team in that regard. We'll learn a lot about them at home on Thursday night against Tampa Bay. Atlanta does also have injuries on the offensive line, but the defense is mostly healthy and playing pretty well. They're opportunistic. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't allow a lot of big explosive plays, and they're pretty good against the run for the most part. I would say that their offense, Cousins, London, and Mooney has been the main component of this offense that's been impressive for me, especially off of play action pass. The run game, Bijan has been a little quiet for my liking. Tyler Algier has hit some runs that have impressed me, but the offensive line not being healthy does not allow them to be the powerful running team that you would have thought. And overall, the coaching offensively has been a little bit less than I would have expected. Cousins has been okay to good, but not great. So this team I think is good, but I don't think they're great. They're number 11. Entering the top 10, at number 10, the Seattle Seahawks in a loss actually impressed me quite a bit against Detroit. Their passing game, in my opinion, is one of my favorite to watch in the NFL. I love Lockett, Metcalf, and JSN and how they're playing and how they mix together. Lockett being both a downfield and underneath target, DK being a perimeter downfield target, and then the ability to be tough and physical to win over the middle as well. And then JSN with his slipperiness and yak ability. Kenneth Walker might be the best running back in the NFL right now. With Christian McCaffrey out, what I see from Kenneth Walker running the ball, I mean, that one play against the Lions where he did a somersault was unbelievable. He is unbelievable. The offensive line is a little underwhelming, but Geno Smith is really good. Guys, Geno Smith is a really good quarterback. I love how he's throwing the ball, like just his mechanics, his accuracy, his power. He does throw some risky passes at times that can get picked off, but I love his aggression. It almost reminds me of Stafford. He kind of reminds me of Stafford in some ways. Defensively, they were very beat up against the Lions, so it was understandable that they were susceptible to the run because they were missing their entire defensive line, and then Julian Love got hurt later in the game. But I think when they get their full defense, they are a top half defense in the league. I think they're not as good as people quite think they are because they have played weak competition. But I love Witherspoon. I love the D-line when it's there. Love when he's there. I think Dodson has played really well at linebacker. So at number 10, I like Mike McDonald's team so far. I think they're playing good football, and I'm especially impressed with their offense. At number 9, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are sort of like the Seahawks. I think a well-schemed and well-coordinated defense with some injuries, along with an offense that I really like to watch. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Baker Mayfield, a quarterback that, like Geno Smith, super underrated the way that he's playing. The offensive line for Tampa, I'd say, is better than Seattle, but it's not great. Seattle's run game is better, but Tampa, does have 2 running backs in Irving and White that are good receivers and pretty competent runners. Godwin and Evans have been one of the best, if not the best, receiver combinations so far this year. And then they've got depth like McMillan and Palmer and Otten that makes plays every now and again. Baker has made a lot of plays with his legs. Todd Bowles' defense has stood strong despite, missing Vita Vea throughout the year, Antoine Winfield, guys that are important to their defense. I mean, Kalijah Kancey hasn't even played yet. So once they get their full staff on defense, along with the way their offense is playing, this is an NFC contender, in my opinion, an NFC low-key contender that I think deserves more respect. Tampa Bay at number 9. At number 8, the Houston Texans. The Texans, I think you could put at 8 or 9 here, or even 7, depending on your perspective. Stroud played great against the Jags, and Nico Collins played even better than Stroud. The offensive line continues to be frustrating, and I think this is the biggest area of weakness for this team so far this year, along with penalties and a lack of consistency in terms of those details. Penalties were hugely detrimental against Minnesota, against Chicago, and against Jacksonville. This is a team that I think is winning despite themselves. I think they are winning regardless of how many mistakes they're making, which can be a very good thing. If they can fix those mistakes, they could dive into an elite tier. They're 3-1, despite playing some, at times, very ugly and atrocious-looking football. Their defense, I think, has been spotty in terms of coverage. I think run defense, not as good as last year, but still pretty good. Pass rush has been very dynamic when they get the opportunity to really rush the quarterback. I have not been super impressed with Slowick this year from a play calling perspective, but Stroud still looks like the same, nuanced passer in terms of accuracy and placement, along with his ability to scramble. I think he's elite in that regard with his ability to avoid sacks and make plays from nothing. Joe Mixon will really help them run the ball better because right now they're really struggling with a lot of negative early down runs, which put them in bad situations. I think Diggs has looked really good. They need to get more out of Tank Dell once he's healthy, but the Texans have the promise and the potential to get to this top 6, top 5 where we thought they would land. But right now, they're just not playing well enough overall in terms of the details. At number 7, the Green Bay Packers, who lost to the Vikings at home. They were embarrassed early on, and they made a nice fight at the end to make this thing pretty interesting. Jordan Love looked clearly not himself early and definitely looked like a guy that was a little rusty and a little bit worried about his injury. They lost Christian Watson, but I don't think that will really hurt too much given the depth of the receiving core. The O-line is talented. I'd like to see them become more of a run-heavy team than a pass-heavy team moving forward and lean on the balance, which made them special late last year. The defense, to me, is just still too inconsistent, especially when they play good offenses. They've been exposed at linebacker. They've been exposed with the thin secondary, and even at times run defense. Their pass rush needs to be a bit more dominant for them to win these type of games. I'm just expecting more out of this team. I really like Matt LaFleur. I still think Jordan Love is their guy and a good guy, but there's something missing right now. I need to see them beat down a team. I need to see them enforce their will on a team that's at least competent, because I have not seen that yet. At number 6, the San Francisco 49ers. Some people will go drastic and put the Niners back in the top 3 because they beat the Patriots in a manhandling fashion. But overall, I've just seen too many spotty things about the 49ers for me to be convincingly putting them in the top 5. I want to see more, especially from the Niners defensive line, which I feel like has been hit and miss all year against the run and the pass and a pass rushing unit. I was really impressed with number 91 on the 49ers defensive line, as well as Mustafa at safety. I thought both those guys looked really good. Fred Warner, to me, is the defensive player of the year right now. He's been freaking phenomenal. Devondre Campbell has been a little bit susceptible. They could really use Dre Greenlaw healthy. I love Ward and Lenore. I mean, low-key top 3 corner duo in football. Unbelievable play from them. Hufanga hopefully can come back and be healthy. He missed last game after playing the game before. But I think it really comes down to their D-line play. And if they can be a little bit better against the run, I think that will put them in more advantageous positions in the pass game, just as they did against New England. If they can continue that track record of what we saw against New England in the weeks following, that will make their defense hit a different level because they can pin their ears back in 3rd and long situations. The offense, I think, looked the best it looked all year against New England, just in terms of the combination of balance, run, play action. Purdy looks unbelievable. Like, he looks like an elite MVP candidate. Kittle looked healthy. Mason looked good. Juwan Jennings made plays. Debo made plays. They don't have McCaffrey still, and Ayuk has still kind of been a little underwhelming, although he feels like he's getting better with each and every week. So the Niners offense is for real again. Like, they're going to be a top 3 offense by the end of the year for sure, if they're not already. But it's the defense that I think will rather maximize or minimize their ceiling. Right now, I'm just needing to see more than them playing the worst team in the league. At number 5, the Buffalo Bills, who got shellacked by the Ravens. And we should have seen this coming a little bit more, just in terms of the Bills missing some pieces at the second level of their defense. Teron Johnson, Matt Milano, and also Bernard, 2 starting linebackers and their nickel corner, which the Ravens were able to take advantage of both in the pass and the run game, especially early in the passing game. And then their offense, just a little unlucky, I felt, against the Ravens. But on top of that, it was just too Josh Allen oriented. They need a running game to a certain degree to kind of lessen that load off of the exposing of their receiver talent, which I thought showed up against the Ravens. Shakir was banged up, which caused more targets to go to other players who weren't making plays, like Mac Hollins, for example. And, Allen wasn't his best, but I felt like he was trying his best. It's just that there was not a lot available, which I think also speaks to Joe Brady probably had his worst game of the season as well. So I'm not worried about this team. I still feel like Allen is on course and on pace to win MVP. I don't know. There's things about both the defense and the offense that have me like lingering in my mind to be worried about them come January, but I think they'll be fine for now. They'll definitely win their division. I think they'll win 11, 12 games. It's just like, I want to continue to see them play these elite teams and how they fare in those games. Will their talent continue to be exposed? Is this an injury thing? Was it just a bad spot? Was it a bad matchup? What exactly was it about that Ravens game? At number 4, the Baltimore Ravens. Speaking of the Ravens defense definitely played their best game of the season against Buffalo in terms of the creativity, the mixing of coverage and rush and blitz. I thought Van Noy played amazing. I thought that the kid on the outside, the corner from the first round, played well. Humphrey playing dirty as ever, but not bad. Kyle Hamilton playing really well. Roquan was actually kind of quiet. But their pass rush, if they can continue to rush the quarterback the way they did against Buffalo and mixing in those blitzes, I think they'll be in good shape. Now, they're an elite run defense. On the other side, Lamar, I still want to see more from the passing game. And I think that game script has been very good for them against Dallas and Buffalo. The fact that they've been able to run the ball, lean on Derrick Henry, play from in front, that's where they want to be. I think they've done a better job closing out games than they did against the Raiders, which was a huge flaw. And, we were very critical about that for them. So that was big. I will say, though, their defense played the best game. Their offense seems to have more of an identity led by Derrick Henry. I'm just worried about the games in which they fall behind because I think that is where they'll once again look like a bit of a pretender. But I think, given the exposure we've seen to the NFL so far, that flaw is not enough for me to say this team isn't a contender. So, the Ravens. At number 3, the Detroit Lions. The Lions looked awesome on offense against Seattle and looked like a juggernaut. They look like the offense from last year. They even pulled off a trick play to Jared Goff. Jared Goff, speaking of him, did not have an incompletion. He completed a perfect game. I hated the play action near the end of the game, which resulted in a safety. But other than that, Gibbs and Monty were running it. The O-line is great. Goff was pulling the trigger to the middle of the field where he always is. Amon-Ra looked like Amon-Ra. Sam Laporta needs to get healthier. Jamison Williams, a home run waiting to happen. I low-key loved Tim Patrick in this game in a couple moments. And the defense is just the area where I'm really worried. Like with the Ravens, I'm worried about them trailing in games. With the Lions, I'm worried about them against good passing games in general because they're exposed in the secondary constantly. Terrion Arnold holds way too much. Davis is an inconsistent CB1. There's plays where he shuts down players and makes great plays on the ball. There's other times where he gets beat. And that's just the way they play, right? They play a lot of man coverage, and Carlton Davis is not Darrelle Revis, so he's not going to shut everybody down. And then, they missed Brian Branch. They're missing a little bit. I felt like the pass rush was not as good as you would have thought at home against an undermanned Seattle offensive line. But Geno played really, really well. I will say Geno played really, really well. And it was a tough spot because the Lions, they were playing from ahead. And Geno is constantly making dimes down the field. And that's one of the better receiving cores in football. So it's a tough matchup for them, I will say. But they don't really want to see Seattle in the playoffs with a fully healthy Seahawks defense. But the Lions, you do wonder if they're playing Purdy and the Niners, even Dallas to a certain degree, if they're playing Seattle, if they're playing maybe the Vikings, but maybe they match up better with the Vikings than the other teams, maybe the Packers, like teams that can really throw the ball with a plethora of receivers. That's going to give them problems, especially if that team has a better defense. So at number 3, the Lions. At number 2, the Chiefs. I got the Chiefs at 2, and I would have put them at 1, but Rashee Rice got injured, which is why I have them at 2. I think without Rashee Rice, it's going to be very difficult for this team to three-peat without Rashee Rice. I don't see any explosive or competent, consistent weapons on this team. Travis Kelce doesn't look like Travis Kelce. He looks slow, old, and washed. They're wearing T-shirts for him, and all he is washed. He didn't pass away. The offensive line is still a little underwhelming at tackle. The run game is inconsistent, although Kareem Hunt gave them a spark against the Chargers. And they barely beat the Chargers by a game-winning touchdown. You know, the Chargers are a team that they didn't have their tackles. They didn't have Joey Bosa. They didn't have Derwin James. I mean, they barely beat, with a banged-up Herbert. Like, you're barely beating the Chargers? That's not a good sign for me. So style points for the Chiefs. I know they're 4-0, but they have not been there. And there's a team that's 4-0 that has way more style points. And I'm just going to put the Vikings at 1 to just fully admit that I've been wrong about the team. And whether I believe they're 1 or not, and whether I would, gun to my head, pick them to beat the Chiefs, it doesn't really matter. I think for the sake of this video, I want to admit that the Vikings are a good football team. And for now, I have them at number 1. And it feels like every week I put a new team at number 1, they lose. But the Vikings defense is top 3 in football. I love the way they're playing. I love the mixture of coverage, design, cover 2, blitzes, 0 blitzes. Gilmore, by the way, nobody gives him credit. Ageless, unbelievable player. Van Ginkel, unreal. Jonathan Grenard has helped. I love how guys like Jerry Tillery are playing, Blake Cashman. The defense is really good. Metellus is a good football player. The offense, Sam Darnold was super accurate. That one throw to Jefferson for the touchdown was superb. The O-line is low-key one of the best in football. Aaron Jones is playing like a top 10 running back. Jordan Addison looks like one of the best receiver 2s in football. And again, they don't have TJ Hawkinson yet. This is a legitimate NFC contender. I don't know if they'll get it done. It is the Vikings. They're known to choke, but right now they look like the most complete team in the NFL. They actually do. It's kind of crazy to say, but they do. And they've had style points. They've gone to Green Bay and beat Green Bay. They were up big. They beat the Texans at home. They beat the Niners at home. Those 3 teams are all in the top 10. And they beat a Giants team that is not good, but they're competent, right? So Vikings, to me, playing like the best team in the league after 4 weeks. That doesn't mean they'll be the best team in February, but right now they are. And given that Rashee Rice is hurt, that's why I have the Chiefs at number 2. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. We'll see you in the next video. Love ya. Deuces.